Okay. Before we get into where we left off yesterday, I think we need to cover a critical point that every single class seems to get a little wrong. So that might be my fault. Everybody's got the same problem. And that is when you go out to the ground power unit, or even if you're doing this on an aircraft, it's one thing to really understand how all of this works and the fuel metering force, all that, but what are you going to be doing as a mechanic? You're going to be taking a carburetor out of a box, bolting it onto an engine, and setting it up. Carburetors, fuel injection units, all of that stuff, it does not come set up to the engine. You have to do that. So if you're going to work on general aviation aircraft, you will do this over and over and over. And it's something you're going to check on every single annual, and you can adjust it every single annual. So you got to get the concept right. So once you get it bolted up to the aircraft and you hook up the fuel line, and by the way, when you hook up the fuel line, what should you always put on the fuel line? Not tape. The little torque stripe stuff to indicate that you've torqued it and tightened it, because far too many people have been killed because mechanics hook up hoses and think, I'll tighten that a little bit. Because the problem is a hose that is put on looks tight. There's no way to determine that it's not. So put it on all the way, and finish it. But then the next thing you're going to do is you're going to adjust idle speed and idle mixture. All right, where do you adjust the idle speed? Ooh. Yes, go ahead. Foreshadow.
The idle speed screw.
The idle speed screw is correct. Where do you adjust idle mixture? The idle mixture screw. Let's see if we can find a picture of a little Stromberg carburetor. Oh, hey, we can use this one right here. All right, so this particular slide, what is this little item called right here?
Idle mixture.
That is the idle mixture adjustment. What is this screw right here?
Full throttle. Oh,
that's probably the full throttle adjustment, but the other side is going to look just like that. So it's a little screw. Where am I? There we go. So it's just a little screw, and what you do is there's multiple ways to do this, but on an airplane, if I'm going to assume that it's not set up correctly, and I will bolt it up to the aircraft, and well, there's no harm, no foul in seeing how it works on the aircraft, because it's going to be very close. And there's always a chance that it is set up correctly. Assume it's not, but there's always a chance. So I'm going to bolt it up to the aircraft. This does take This does take a gasket that goes here. And I'm going to warn you right now that there have been many instances where the opening is supposed to match this, but the opening is kind of like this. What do we call that, NASCAR fans?
Restrictor plate.
That's called a restrictor plate. So if your gasket is much smaller than what it's supposed to be, that's going to restrict the flow. So don't do that. Laser pointer. Well, that sounds like fun. All right, so chase it around. Go get it. Yeah. Okay, so put a gasket. You're going to bolt it up. You are going to hook up the throttle lever and the mixture lever to the cockpit. You'll get more of this later on in the program, but when you connect these items, it's always important that you have something called cushion. And cushion means that when you push the throttle forward in the cockpit, it should always reach its stop out here before it reaches the stop in the cockpit. And when you pull back on the control, it should meet the stop out here before it meets the stop in the cockpit. So in other words, nothing in the cockpit is the stop or the control. It's everything out here on the carburetor is the stop or the control. Right, that's called cushion. So it's important to set it up that way.
And how do you compromise then the pull on the cable or whichever is connected?
You just have to set it up right. Like for me, what I will do is I'll go in the cockpit and I'll push the throttle all the way forward in the cockpit and then pull it back out at least a quarter of an inch. And then I'll lock it because there's locks on it. And then I will go in when I'm installing it, and then I will install this arm so that the carburetor now goes all the way to full throttle forward. And then adjust it so now the carburetor's at full throttle and I know I've got at least a quarter inch inside the cockpit. Then I will, once it's connected, I'll go in the cockpit, release the control knob, pull it all the way back to idle, and then walk out and visually check, make sure that this stop went all the way to idle. So it goes full stop, and then I'll probably have another set of eyes out there while I move it back and forth. So I'm going to go in the cockpit, move it back and forth, say, hey, I want you to go out there and you to watch it, make sure nothing's binding, everything is moving smooth, nothing interferes. And I'll do the same thing over here for the mixture control. Yeah.
So if you put the throttle in full all the way, pushing it all the way, it'll stop a quarter of an inch because that's where you set it before you attach that.
So
it's not going to go all the way to the throttle pole.
Nope. And in fact, if I got in an airplane that I wasn't familiar with it off, and I wanted to check controls, I'll push all the controls forward, make sure there's a cushion. If it's not, I'm probably not going to go anywhere. So wait a minute, I don't know for a fact that when I push my throttle all the way forward here, that it's stopped out there. So that's not going to work for me.
How do you know if there is a cushion?
You can see it.
So you push it in and then go out and look?
No. With the engine off, you have quadrants, don't you?
No, it's push-pull.
Push-pull like the poster here.
Are you talking about in the cockpit?
Yeah, in the cockpit.
Yeah, it's like your throttle.
All right, normal push-pull. So push it all the way forward, and look, you should still have a little bit of room to go.
Oh, so there's nothing internal behind the panel.
No, it's all, no, you should see it all external. And it should look like, hey, wait a minute, I got a little more here to go, but it's because it's hitting on the outside.
Kevin, you know that these systems have, like the second carburetor, like if the cable breaks, the spring would bring it to open. Why isn't that mandatory for all carburetors?
I don't know. And the spring, okay, so his question is, a lot of carburetors have a spring that is wrapped around here that forces the carburetor to go wide open. So whenever it's sitting on the bench, it's wide open. You can pull the lever back and it swings wide open. And the theory being that if you ever accidentally lost your cable connection down here, that it would swing and go wide open. You're better off to have wide open than not. And then you could just, you know, as you...
So I know a guy that flight instructor was teaching forced landings. They were at 300 feet over the mountains, and the thing snapped.
Wow.
And they had to crash land and work.
So this carburetor doesn't have it. The Marvel shovelers, it's so weak, I wouldn't trust it. It's almost too weak to do anything, and not even all of them have it. So I don't know. You're right. It would be a cheap and easy safety thing. I don't know why they don't, but they don't. So, all right. So back to this. Okay. So I've got it on the aircraft, the right gasket, safety. By the way, this is probably not safety wired, as crazy as that sounds. We've set the proper controls up. Now we're ready to test this thing. So get in the aircraft, I'm going to start it up. All right, and let it warm up, maybe put your throttle in a little bit, raise the RPM, pull it back to idle, and I'm going to sit there and see where it idles. All right. What if I pull it back to idle and it goes 600, 500, 450, 400 dies?
It was already lean.
It's not necessarily a lean problem. Start it up again and I push the throttle in a little bit, bring it up to 500 RPM, maybe 550. It sits there and purrs like a kitten. It's just running really nice at 550. Pull the throttle back a little bit more. RPM falls and the thing dies. What is that telling you?
Idle set too
Yeah,
low.
It's just
Idle
telling me
set
that
too
the
high.
idle is set too low. The air, like our ground power unit, it won't idle much below, wow, what do you guys, 500? It just won't. It used to, but you know, it's getting old, wore out, it doesn't. So, you know, in the airplane, it doesn't want to idle that slow. And the last thing you want is for, pilots, they may call you, hey, I'm taxiing down the runway or taxiing down the taxiway. I'm waiting for my turn to enter the runway. I pull the throttle back, and airplane, it dies every single time. Can you bump the throttle up for me a little bit? Well, all you're going to do is take a screwdriver on the other side, and there's a little twist, and it's going to push the screw in so that it doesn't close so much, and the little throttle valve will open just a little bit more. So it won't allow it to close quite as much. So a little more air gets through, a little more fuel gets in with that air, and all we're doing is setting the idle speed. Everybody follow?
Mm-hmm.
So where do you set the idle speed?
On the ground.
With the idle speed set screw. Did I touch this down here at all?
No.
Why not?
Mixture.
Because this is the mixture. Now the mixture will have some effect on the speed, but it's not how you adjust the speed. So if a pilot came in and said, oh man, every time I pull my throttle back, the airplane just dies. Well, first thing I want to ask is, how long has it been doing that? Just started yesterday. Well, maybe we have a problem here. It could be worn out bushings, letting the air in. Something else could be wrong. I'd be worried about that. But it's been doing it for a very long time, since I've owned the plane. It's just, I've just learned not to pull the throttle all the way back, because it always does that. And or maybe they say, ever since I bought that new carburetor and put it on myself, it's done that. Well, there we go. You never adjusted it properly. So let's try adjusting it properly. So, all right, so adjust idle speed. Everybody follow me at idle speed? Okay, now I want to adjust the idle mixture. All right, which screw am I going to use here? Okay, now we're going to come to this idle mixture. The idle mixture will affect the speed to a narrow range. All right, so, but that's not how you adjust speed. If a customer showed up and said, I need my idle speed bumped up, and you went to the idle mixture and started monkeying with that, it may have been perfectly set mixture. Now you're ruining the mixture to try and bump up speed. And by the way, you shouldn't be able to get more than 25 to 50 RPM out of it max anyway with this little thing. So, but idle speed, idle mixture. All right, so idle speed is set. The airplane idles really well. Everybody's happy. Now you can adjust the mixture. And if you have, again, I know it's a bit of a repeat, this particular carburetor, let me back up. The other carburetors, this is the Stromberg, the Marvel Shovelers, when you pull back on the idle mixture, it's a valve. And so it actually closes off the fuel. So you can do an adjustment, go in the cockpit, start it up, pull the mixture back, and you should get a 50 RPM rise before it dies. You can't on this one. It just doesn't work that way because there's no idle cutoff in the idle range. So what can you do? Well, in the field, the way we do this in the field is we screw it all the way in, back it out 1.5 turns, and if it sounds fine, starts fine, and looks fine, you leave it alone. If the pilot comes back and complains that spark plugs are fouling out at idle, please lean it up a little bit. You can lean it up a little bit. On our ground power unit, you have the luxury of messing with it. All right, and so, okay. So we have 2 gauges that you can use. RPM, MAP. What's MAP?
Manifold Pressure.
Okay, so let's say this is 600, this is 500, and let's say I want to kind of target 550. On the manifold pressure, we have 10, 20, we'll call that 15, and we can do that. All right, so on the manifold pressure, we'll do RPM. So RPM, what we can do is, let's say we screwed this all the way in. Is that going to be rich or lean?
Lean.
Okay, it's going to be lean, all right? So as I screw it out, what's going to happen? It's going to richen up. And it's going to get to a point called
Peak power.
peak power or best power. So as I screw it out, I'm going to watch the RPM go up, 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 and then it's going to get to a point and start falling. What happened when it got to this point? So let's say it.
That's your peak.
That's
where it peaked out. So if I'm screwing it out, I screw it out, I screw it out, I screw it out, then it starts to go down. What are you going to do?
Screw it back in.
Screw it back into peak. All right, so now I made it at peak. But what do I want it to be?
About 25 to 50 or
Reach
rich.
25 to 50 degrees, the rich.
25 to 50 degrees RPM, rich of peak RPM, not peak exhaust. So, all right, so I've got it sitting here at peak. I've determined that this is peak. Everybody follow me so far? What do I want to do?
About 25 to 50.
Enrichen it, which means screw this knob out until I see a drop of
25 to 50 RPM.
25 to 50 RPM. So it should be sitting right there. Done. Now, in reality, it's not going to start down here at 400 and work its way up to 600. It's going to kind of bounce right around in here a little bit. All right? So don't expect this big change from this. It just doesn't work that way. That's why this is not the idle speed control. Now, let's look at manifold pressure. Right, the next thing. So manifold pressure, normally, yeah.
If you adjust the mixture control and you either raise or lower the RPM and you don't like it, could you go back and readjust?
Yeah, and I was gonna I'll make that a point here. Well, since you brought it up, in the field, I don't set speed first. I set the speed in the cockpit because I can lock the throttle control where I want it. Then I adjust the mixture. Then I set the set screw to where I want it. So I do it in the field. I do it backwards because of the very fact you brought up. It doesn't make sense to get a perfect speed and then go, now I'm going to adjust the mixture, which could affect it 25 to 50 RPM. You can actually get your mixture running really nice. And if it's running nice, you can actually get the idle down a little further maybe, so you might find something a little better. So yes, in reality, I do it the other way around. But I'm trying to kind of help you guys understand because I have so many people doing the orals. And so if you think I'm talking about you singularly, it's not you singularly. It's a thing with all the classes I teach, and most everybody in here has already made this mistake, so don't feel bad.
So are you doing this only one time, or you return and do adjustment the second time?
No, you should be able to do it one time. And then I check it every annual. Or in my plane, I check it every time I fly it. So, okay, so manifold, same thing. On our ground power unit, this needle bounces a lot. All right, so it's really hard to watch. Normally, on a manifold pressure gauge, when the RPM goes up, the manifold follows it. So as I increase the throttle, I'm opening the throttle plate. And as the throttle plate opens, more air gets in. Because remember, we've got, with the throttle plate closed, the engine's, it's pulling, it's fighting. It really wants some air, and it's getting nothing because this throttle plate is closed. So you have this massive vacuum, basically, that's going on. So it's super low. This is a vacuum is down at this end. Because remember, if we get up here to 30 inches, what is 30 inches?
29.92.
It's atmospheric. So when I shut off the engine, when the engine's sitting there completely shut off and not running, I should see about 30 inches. And as I start it up at an idle, it's going to drop way down here. All right? And then as I open the throttle, it's going to follow it right back up. When I get to wide open throttle, it's going to be right about there, about an inch shy.
So if your gauge when the engine shut off isn't at 30, is that kind of an indication that your gauge is not calibrated properly?
Yep.
So you need a new one?
So like if I had nice instrumentation, what I would do is I would set my altimeter to field elevation. That will tell you in the Colesman window exactly what the barometric pressure is. And then that window should match exactly what the manifold pressure says. So if you have a split between those, then you have a problem. So as soon as this is right, or you could always listen to the ATIS around here, and they would say current barometers, 29.9, and you go, yes, 29.9. Okay, so normally these are going to follow each other. They both go up together and they both go down. All right, but we're not moving the throttle plate now. The throttle plate is stuck closed, and if the engine RPM goes up and the throttle plate doesn't move, it's more suction. And if the throttle plate doesn't move and the RPM goes down, that's less suction. So it's actually going to move the opposite of the way it normally would. So with the throttle plate closed, locked, not moving. We are stuck. We are in idle, locked down in idle. And I start adjusting this screw. As the RPM goes up, what's going to happen here? Manifold will start going down. More suction. So it might start here, start going down, 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 and it's going to get to a point and just kind of stabilize. When it stabilizes at the lowest point here, what did it do over here? It peaked over here. So this is going to peak up at the same time this peaks down. All right, so now we got the two peaks. Now if this is bouncing around, I can't watch it. I can screw the needle out, 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 out. It peaks up, and I keep screwing it out. It's going to go this way. Well, that's fine. You keep screwing it out, you see a peak, and now you're going to swing it back down the other way. How much the other way?
50.
Well, it actually works out to, if it was 25 to 50 RPM, it just becomes 0.25 to 0.50 inches of mercury. Now, it's very rare that you're going to get this kind of carburetor. In fact, I've never had it happen. I've never seen this kind of carburetor on an engine that had a manifold pressure gauge. That's just silliness. Because this is an antique carburetor that's going to go on a Cessna 140, Piper Cub, a Ronca Champ. Most of these aircraft, electricity was an option. So they certainly weren't going to spend money to put a manifold pressure gauge in with a fixed pitch propeller. This isn't going to happen. So it just so happens that our ground power unit does, and I think that that's a great way to teach you something about manifold and RPM relationships. So that's why we keep it on there. So do you follow? Mm-hmm. This screw does what? On the backside. Okay, that's idle speed. This is idle mixture. Now, again, to Tyler's question, because I just told you set idle speed and then this, the reason why you do have to set idle speed here at the school first is because there's no other way to adjust it on the ground power unit. You literally have an arm like this, or you don't even have that arm. You're just using your fingers on it. So you can't hold it still. You got to adjust the screw. Right, and the screw, I don't know, can you see this little piece back in here? Mm-hmm. Okay, that's what it hits against. There's a casting right there. So, but out in the field, I'll first set my mix, then I'll lock in my speed, and then I'm happy and I'm done. Wait.
What is the manifold pressure doing when you are setting idle speed? As the RPM rises,
there we go. Say, ask me again, please.
Yes. What is the manifold pressure doing when you're setting idle speed?
Oh, it's going to follow RPM like it normally does. Okay. So as you open the throttle, manifold pressure goes up. As you close the throttle, manifold pressure goes down. You're not, in fact, to some point, well, I wouldn't use manifold to set my speed. I use a tachometer more than anything. I use my ears, because you want it to idle smooth and not sound like it's going to die. And so, yeah, well, it does. It's just that simple. So if it's kind of like, ooh, that sounds like it's about to die, you got to bump the speed up a little bit. Then you go, okay, that's a low speed, and it sounds like it can run like that for all day long. That's your speed. All right. Let's see. Why not? All right, this is a pretty large marble shoveler. Very little changes in this. This is a big carburetor. This is probably go on like a Cessna 182 or something quite large. I want to call it 182 quite large. Huge plane like a Cessna 182. This is Cessna 182 heavy coming in. Okay. So you have your throttle right here, and you have your mixture control back here. Sound familiar? Okay. How do I set the idle speed? That the little screw right there. The only difference is the other screw was mounted onto the arm, and followed the arm. This one doesn't. It just sits right here, and it's screwed into the carburetor, and the arm comes around and hits it.
Is
So,
that preset, or
what's that?
is that stationary, or can you adjust that one as well?
That's totally adjustable.
Okay.
Totally adjustable. May have a little lock nut back in here. May just have a spring on it that keeps it. So all you do is just screw it in, idles faster. Screw it out, idles slower. Right? Here's your mixture control. Everything is set up the same way. Except you do have this is something that you actually can and will set up more appropriately on an aircraft. So like I told you with the other one, it's pretty much 1.5 turns out, and then kind of it's almost a trial and error from there, because you really can't run the engine and sit there and screw that little thing. It's not safe, and nobody does it. You could if you wanted, I suppose. Have somebody in the cockpit go, I don't know, headphones. There you go, you just peaked. But this one is easy to do. And I check mine every time I fly my aircraft, and it's super easy to set. So again, out in the field, I'm probably going to take this screw and screw it out so it's not in my way. Get in the aircraft, start up the aircraft, and lock the throttle shaft based upon the controls inside. Then what I'm going to do is I'm just going to pull the mixture back in the cockpit. Pull the mixture back. There's a valve that goes down here. It shuts off the fuel, and I should see the RPM rise 25 to 50 and die. Just that fast. Bang, done. And it's dead. Why? Because this valve right here literally shut off all of the fuel. So when it shut off all of the fuel, the carburetor was running a little bit rich, and it goes from that little bit rich, peak power, super lean, got no gas, I'm dead. Faster than I just said all that. So the way you would adjust this then is in the cockpit, just pull it back. Pull back the mixture, the red handle, watch what happens. If it's running at 550 and I pull the red handle back and it just goes from 550 to 0, what does that mean?
Lean.
It's just running, it's either running at peak power or lean. I have no way of knowing. If I pull it back and it goes up 100 RPM and dies.
Way rich.
Way too rich. All right, now you're going to foul out spark plugs. So all you're going to do, and there's just a little screw, I can't show it to you on this one, but it's just right around the corner. It doesn't look any different than the Marvel Chevler. But, okay, so I pull it back, and I got no rise at all. So it was just at 550 and just dropped. Bam, done. So it's running what? Lean or peak. Okay, so I'm going to get out. Now the engine's off. Take that little screw. I'm going to maybe do a quarter turn. Get back in, start it up. I'm going to give it a little throttle, pull it back, kind of clear everything out, kind of refresh it. Pull back on the mixture, and now it goes up 10 RPM and dies. What do I got?
It's a little bit rich.
It's on the rich side of the peak RPM, but according to the manual, it should be a little bit more. So get out, get another quarter turn, check it. It goes up 25 RPM and then suddenly dies.
Good.
I'm good to go. Adjust my throttle stop where I want it. I'm set. And it's just that simple. All right, but you have to understand the difference between this series of, the Stromberg and everything else. Yeah.
Why do they give you a range of 25 to 250 if you want to go mainly just to 25 and then call it quits? Decide if you're a little bit over, you don't have to get back out and adjust it back down and keep going, or?
Because honestly, it's not quite that easy to pick out 25 to 50 RPM. You can almost hear it faster than you can see it on the tack. They're not that accurate. They're still mechanical tacks with a cable spinning in there. So just give you a range to shoot for. Yeah, in case you're lazy and you're like, yeah, 26. Come on, man.
In case you're doing it by American standards, not Japanese.
That's right. Yeah. See, there we go. There's a decent picture of the little. See, it's the same looking set screws we had before. No difference. There's the smaller carburetor. While I'm just kind of on my little rabbit trail of stuff that you guys are experiencing problems with in the lab, there's one thing that, and I wish they explained it better, but they don't. But you will be doing airworthiness directives on these Marvel carburetors. And it could be Marvel, Facet, Precision Air Motive. It just changed names, but I'll just call them Marvel. And it even says in the your project sheet that you're going to do the airworthiness directives. And this is something that I'm going to take very, very serious. So you have to look at these airworthiness directives. You have to read them, and you have to explain to me what the airworthiness directive wanted. Does your carburetor have this problem, and what are you going to do about it? All right, and what is horrible is a lot of times this class will never do it, but the other class, they would just guess at things and things like spot face and mill flat. People, who knows off the top of your head what the difference between spot face and mill flat is, right? And I don't blame you. And unfortunately, the airworthiness directive doesn't give you any guidance. It just says you need to determine if it has a mill flat or spot face. And if it's got this, then you do this. If it's got that, you do that. And then people go, I don't know. I suppose if it was really important, it would have been common knowledge or something. I don't know. So then I get all tweaky because I'm like, come on, you want to be an aircraft mechanic, you gotta, stop. So that's one of those things where if you get to something, like, well, I don't want to single anybody out, but I had a really good student today who came to me and said, Kevin, what is spot face and mill flat? I never heard of this. Please explain this to me. This looks important. I'm like, yeah, good for you. So then that reminded me that, hey, it's time to bring this up and talk about it. So what the problem is, this right here is a new style throttle arm that they came out with. It's been a long time now. And this has what I call serrations on it. And as long as this nut is there and cotter pin, can you see how those lock together? They scissor lock? Okay, that's the good style. And you want this on your airplane. The old style is what all of you have on your carburetors. And it's very much like the Stromberg style. And it's just a shaft with the throttle arm clamped around it. So you're really depending upon just the clamping pressure on this slippery little shaft. And so what happens if the friction between those two come undone?
You lose your throttle capability.
You use your throttle. You go to push forward, and this thing's going, I'm not going forward. Because there's between this throttle shaft here and this arm sticking out, there's no positive enforcement. So this is a problem. And they had to come out with airworthiness directives, which means what?
People die.
People are dying for this, right? And so in the airworthiness directive, so by the way, the compliance for this airworthiness directive, I'm going to tell you right now, get rid of those throttle arms and you put this style on. That solves the problem. But before that, you had the option of one of the throttle arms was milled flat, and I believe you had to get rid of that one, and then another one is spot faced, and that one was okay. I may have those backwards, I don't remember it, because my solution was to put this on. And then they wanted you to wrap safety wire around this, and then safety wire around this, so that the safety wire at least held these two sort of together when it came loose. So the difference between milled flat and spot face is a procedure. When you do a spot face on a mill, see how this is all like cast, and right here you can see they've done some machine work here. So in a way, what they've done is they put it on a mill, and a mill is like it's like a very fancy drill press. And we have several of them in the shop, and it goes back and forth, fore and aft, up and down. And so they'll put a cutting tool to spot face, and they'll bring it down and just cut a circle straight down so that you can bolt something. And really, that's what they did right here. That's spot faced. They just brought the tool down. They cut this area out with a round cutting wheel, and now you're left with a spot face where you can bolt one thing down. All right. As opposed to really what they did up here, that wasn't done with just bringing a tool down and just hitting it, and then pulling it up. They put the tool down, they cut it flat, and they went all the way around. So it's been milled flat. This has been spot face. Are you following me on that one? So when you get to that airworthiness directive, does it have just a circle? Or do you see a line that went all? So if I wanted to mill flat this, it would have meant they would have put the spot face here and then just drug it all the way across here and milled this whole thing flat. So you could have put a bunch of screws in there. So that's milled flat versus spot face.
So the top is
well, it's my best example. It's milled flat, yeah. and this has been spot faced in.
Can,
Yeah.
can you make your cursor bigger when you're in that view?
Yes, I can. Thank you
Can't
for
really
asking.
see it. I never
Okay.
know what you're pointing at.
Then couldn't see what I was pointing at?
Yeah, just smaller glasses.
No, he's right. Because, does this work?
Yeah.
All right, so I just got to do that. So this here, milled flat, spot face.
Spot face.
See, now that's why I should have just kept my mouth shut. Spot face and then milled flat. And I was saying that it's like they came all the way across here. So, hey. All righty then. Technology, gotta love it. Well, let's see. How about we take a break?